I found out my son wasn't mine after my wife cheated, but I still raised him as my own, until he chose his real dad and cut me off. Now that he's learned I'm wealthy, he suddenly wants to reconnect. Hello Reddit I+ here. My name is Raymond, and if someone had told me 15 years ago that the boy I once loved more than life itself would someday turn his back on me, only to reappear when he discovered my wealth, I would have laughed and called them cruel. But life has a way of breaking you quietly, one betrayal at a time, until you realize that love, sacrifice, and loyalty mean nothing to some people until they see value in what they once discarded. This is the story of how I became a father, lost everything, and found peace in the ruins of what used to be my family. 15 years ago, I was 30 years old, happily married to Grace, a woman I believed was my forever. We'd been together since college. She was the witty, ambitious one with a laugh that filled every room, and I was the grounded type who wanted a simple, steady life. After 5 years of marriage, Grace told me she was pregnant. I remember dropping to my knees, tears in my eyes, whispering, "Thank you," over and over. Becoming a father was all I'd ever wanted. When our son Lucas was born, the world stopped. I'd never seen anything more perfect. The moment he wrapped his tiny hand around my finger, I silently vowed that no matter what happened in this world, I'd protect him, guide him, and love him beyond reason. And for years, I did. I was there for every milestone. The first step, the first word, the first day of school. I worked as an IT specialist at a growing company and poured every extra dollar into making our little home perfect. Grace worked part-time as an event planner, but as Lucas grew older, she spent more and more nights working late. At first, I brushed it off. Grace was sociable, she thrived in crowds, and I wanted her to have her space. But as months turned into years, I began to notice small cracks forming in our marriage. Things that didn't add up. She'd guard her phone like it was a state secret. She'd come home smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine, and her laughter, once easy and genuine, had become sharp and distant. Still, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. After all, we had a family. We had Lucas. Everything shattered when Lucas was 7. I had just gotten home early one Friday when Grace's phone buzzed on the counter. A message flashed. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You looked stunning in blue." The message came from a contact saved under G. I stood frozen, my world collapsing in slow motion. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to know. For the next week, I quietly gathered evidence. Receipts, messages, even photos. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. Grace had been seeing a man named Harold, one of her clients, for nearly 2 years. When I finally confronted her, she didn't cry. She didn't deny it. She just said, "Ray, I didn't mean for it to happen. You were always working." I felt lonely. That word broke me more than the affair itself. I had worked overtime to give her and Lucas everything, and somehow that made her feel lonely. We separated for a while, but I still visited every day for Lucas. He was my anchor, the one innocent soul in all this chaos. I couldn't let my bitterness poison him. Then came the day that destroyed what little remained of my peace. During a counseling session, Grace confessed something she'd kept hidden even from herself. The affair hadn't started 2 years ago. It began before she got pregnant. There was a chance, a real, horrifying chance, that Lucas wasn't mine. I remember going cold, like my soul had left my body. I barely made it through that session. Grace cried, begged me not to ruin everything with a test, saying Lucas was mine in every way that mattered. But I had to know. I arranged for a private DNA test. When the results came back, the paper felt heavier than it should have. One line, one truth. Probability of paternity, 0%. Lucas was not my biological son. I stared at that paper for what felt like hours, until my tears blurred the words. My entire life, every smile, every bedtime story, every proud moment, had been built on a lie. Grace fell apart when I told her I knew, but I wasn't angry anymore. Just empty. We divorced soon after. Lucas was 8 when the papers were finalized. The court said I didn't owe child support because I wasn't the biological father, but I refused to walk away from him. Biology be damned, I was his dad. I continued to support him financially and emotionally, visiting him every weekend, showing up to school events, and teaching him the value of kindness and perseverance. Grace started dating Harold openly. He eventually became a regular figure in Lucas's life, but I tried not to interfere. I thought I could share fatherhood, even if it hurt. When Lucas was 10, Harold moved in. That's when things began to shift. My once loving boy started pulling away. The hugs became shorter. The conversations became colder. By the time he was 13, he stopped calling me Dad. I was Ray, now. One evening, he said something that shattered what was left of my heart. Harold's my real father anyway. Why do you even care? He'd found out the truth. Grace had told him. And instead of protecting me, she painted me as some desperate man who couldn't let go. I still remember sitting in my car that night after dropping him off, gripping the steering wheel until my hands shook. I told myself I'd keep loving him anyway, because that's what fathers do. But love doesn't survive where resentment lives. By 15, Lucas barely spoke to me. He chose Harold's last name and stopped visiting entirely. Grace and Harold married, and from that moment, it was like I never existed. Years passed. I threw myself into work, climbed the corporate ladder, and eventually started my own cybersecurity firm. It took sleepless nights, endless failures, and stubborn persistence. But by 45, I had built something remarkable, something that gave me peace. I never remarried. Trust was a language I no longer spoke. Then, one morning, out of nowhere, I got a message. "Hey Ray, it's Lucas. Can we talk?" I stared at that text for nearly an hour. After all these years, after he'd erased me from his life, now he wanted to talk. We met at a cafe. He was 23 now, confident and polished, dressed in designer clothes that screamed money and ambition. He smiled awkwardly and said, "You look good. Heard your company's doing really well, ah?" There it was. It didn't take long for him to mention that things hadn't been great for him. Harold had left his mom, money was tight, and he was trying to get back on his feet. He wanted a connection again, a relationship, a second chance. But as he spoke, I realized he wasn't looking for forgiveness. He was looking for opportunity. For the first time I saw him, not the boy I raised, but the man shaped by lies and choices that weren't mine. I listened quietly, then said, "Lucas, I loved you like my own. I gave you everything I had when I didn't have much to give. And when you found out the truth, you left without looking back. That was your choice. I respected it." He looked down, guilt flickering for a moment. "I was a kid. I didn't understand. Maybe not," I said softly. "But now you're grown, and I've learned that love isn't something people get to use when it's convenient." I stood up, placed enough cash on the table to cover the bill, and said, "I'll always wish you well, son, but you don't get to come back just because I finally became someone worth knowing." I walked away before he could respond. I still think about him sometimes, the boy who wasn't mine, but held my heart anyway. And while I'll never get back those lost years, or the innocence I once had, I've learned something far more valuable. Being a father isn't about blood. It's about loyalty, and loyalty means nothing to those who only return when the world finally applauds you. It had been almost 2 years since that coffee shop meeting with Lucas. 2 years since I watched the boy I once raised, now a man I barely recognized, walk out of my life for the second time. At first, I thought that was the end. But life doesn't like clean endings. It prefers circles, messy, painful ones that bring old wounds back just when you think they've healed. I was 47 when Grace came back into my life. It started with a voicemail. Her voice was shaky, softer than I remembered. "Ray, it's me. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but please, it's about Lucas. It's important." For a few minutes, I just sat there staring at the phone, trying to make sense of the storm those few words stirred in me. She hadn't called me in almost a decade. When I finally called her back, she answered immediately, like she'd been waiting by the phone. Her tone was cautious, nervous. "Ray, I don't know how else to say this. Harold's gone. He left me 2 years ago. He moved out of state. And Lucas, he's been having a hard time. He doesn't talk to me much, but I know he needs help." I said nothing for a long moment. The silence between us stretched thin. Finally I asked, "Why are you telling me this?" She sighed. "Because despite everything that happened, you were always the only steady thing in his life. You were the father he needed, even if he didn't see it then. Please, Ray, don't punish him forever." I let out a bitter laugh. "You think I'm the one punishing him?" Grace went quiet. In that silence, I could almost see her face again. The one I used to love. The one that smiled at me across candlelit dinners and whispered promises we both broke in different ways. After a while, I said, "I'll think about it," and hung up. But I didn't call Lucas. Not then. A few months later, I got another message. This time from Lucas himself. "Mom told me she called you. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I need to talk. Please." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. We met at the same cafe, the one where I'd said goodbye before. It felt strange walking through those doors again, like stepping back into an unfinished story. When he saw me, he stood up awkwardly. He looked different, not just older, but tired. The confident spark he'd once carried was gone, replaced by something fragile. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. I nodded, sitting down across from him. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. He fidgeted with his cup, clearly searching for words that didn't come easily. Finally, he said, "I messed up, Ray. I know that now. I said and did things I can't take back." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. When Harold left, I thought I didn't care. But he didn't even say goodbye. He just disappeared. And Mom, she's been struggling. I thought I was too old to feel abandoned, but it hit me harder than I expected. I studied him carefully, unsure whether to feel sympathy or skepticism. He looked up at me and said, "You were the only one who ever stayed," and I threw that away. That sentence, those words, hit deeper than he knew. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to remind him of the nights I sat alone wondering what I'd done wrong, or the birthdays I missed because he didn't want me there, but all I felt was exhaustion. "I don't hate you, Lucas," I said finally. "I never did. I just stopped chasing people who didn't want to be caught." He nodded slowly. "I get that." We talked for nearly 2 hours that day, about his struggles, his regrets, his plans. He wanted to go back to school, maybe start a small business. He wasn't asking for money, not directly anyway, but I could sense the hesitation in his tone, the careful pauses, where pride and need battled silently. When we finally stood to leave, he looked at me and said, "Do you think we could start over?" I hesitated before answering. "Starting over means honesty, Lucas. It means you don't disappear again when life gives you what you want." He nodded. "I won't." For a while, things were good. We started meeting once a week, having dinner, talking like we used to when he was a kid. It was cautious, fragile, but real. I helped him get into a tech program and even gave him a small job at my firm, mostly administrative work. It wasn't charity. It was a test, for both of us. Months passed, and I started to believe maybe, just maybe, people could change. Then one day, I got a call from one of my managers. "Hey Ray, I don't know if you know this, but your son's been trying to get clients to invest in some crypto scheme. He's been using the company name to gain credibility." My heart sank. I confronted him that evening. He looked cornered, but defiant. "It's not what you think," he said. "I was just trying to make extra money. You have no idea how hard it is to live in your shadow." "Lucas," I said slowly, "you used my company's name. You lied to clients. That's not ambition. That's manipulation." He glared at me, anger flaring. "You think you're so perfect. You think just because you were the good guy everyone owes you forgiveness. You're just bitter because Mom chose someone else." That old wound, the one I thought had scarred over, ripped open again. I stood there in silence for a long moment before I said, "I didn't lose your mother, Lucas. I lost my faith in people who confuse kindness for weakness." He didn't respond. He just stormed out. That was the last time we spoke. He quit the next day, leaving behind nothing but a short text. "I can't be who you want me to be." And maybe he was right. Maybe neither of us could ever be who we were meant to be in each other's lives. A year later, I heard from Grace again, but this time it wasn't a call. It was a letter. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink uneven, like she'd written it through tears. "Ray, I'm sick. The doctors say it's serious. I'm not asking for help, only forgiveness. I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me, you. And I raised a son who carries my mistakes instead of his own. If you see him again, please remind him that you were the only true father he ever had. He may never admit it, but he knows it deep down. I'm sorry for everything. Grace." I didn't know what to feel when I finished reading it. Sadness, anger, relief. Maybe all three. I never saw her again. She passed away a few months later. Lucas didn't attend her funeral. He sent flowers but didn't show. And somehow that felt like the most fitting end to our story. A family broken by lies, reunited by regret, and undone again by pride. I still see Lucas sometimes, from afar. He's doing fine now, from what I hear. Working at a marketing firm, living on his own. We don't talk, but I don't hate him, because despite everything, he taught me something no success ever could. That peace doesn't come from getting back what you lost. It comes from finally letting go of what was never truly yours to begin with. When people ask if I have children, I still pause for a moment before answering. Then I say, softly but surely, I once did. Because for 8 beautiful, painful years, I was a father. And even if the world tells me otherwise, I know that's something no DNA test can erase.